Now I have a question because George over here,
Oh boy.
our local skeptic.
Are you bored, George, or just angry?
I was both. Playing that one. That was good.
Come on, lay it in. Come on.
So go ahead, George.
Did I
1 minute.
I
Go.
put him on the spot.
I know, he's putting me on the spot. Juice leans back, he's like, hey, I know you had that question. I'm like, no, I didn't have a question. And now I'm here, I'm on the spot with the question.
So, as
He's
him,
just trying to get me riled up right now.
As him being a skeptic, and you being
Skeptic of what? Christianity, or
Yes.
skeptic of this view?
Oh no, he's a complete skeptic of all religion.
Oh, okay, that's fair.
That's
fine.
actually why we have him on the show, because we like opposing views.
Well, I have something interesting about that. What's fascinating to me about this, George, is if you know about some of your heroes like Bertrand Russell. Some of them, like Bertrand Russell, literally they made the argument of why they believe Jesus is a false prophet, and he literally said, because he said he was coming within this generation, and he didn't. And the irony is that as a preterist, my whole argument is that actually he did. It's just that you don't read the Hebrew language or the Greek language in the case of the New Testament. You don't read their images and memes and metaphors in your understanding. You have to understand when they're in their understanding and in their context. Coming on the clouds was actually a very common Old Testament phrase used over and over again for when God would come to judge a tribe or a nation, he would say, Yahweh is coming on the clouds. And of course, they knew he didn't literally do that. The idea was clouds are the form of deity, and they're also the symbol of judgment. And so that was over and over and over again in the Old Testament. So when Jesus said, I will come on the clouds and destroy the temple, he actually did, because it was always intended to be symbolic. And so that which the famous skeptic Bertrand Russell used as an argument against Christ, which most futurists would have to admit because they don't believe that he came in judgment. As a preterist, to me, that I have the solution, and it solves that very issue. Of course, I'm not saying Bertrand Russell, if he would have known this, he would have become a Christian. But I'm just saying, let me put it this way. I actually have a connection with some skeptics in the sense that I do believe Jesus was an apocalyptic prophet who was claiming that he was going to come back in judgment within a generation. It's just that how you interpret that should be according to the ancient Hebrew mindset, not ours, if that makes sense.
No, I get you. No, and then what makes it interesting is I love that me and Juice are usually batting at each other back and forth at the other podcast, if you ever listen to them. But you guys Juice is like, yeah, tell him, Brian, because you're kind of saying the same stuff he comes at me with. But for me, and I guess, I'm still kind of early on in my studies. I've even being part of these discussions helps elevate my knowledge and everything. So I'm still kind of studying. I haven't made it all the way through the Bible yet. So Juice has given me the pointers and the literature that helps guide me through everything. But for me, it just, I don't believe in anything, and I know what you're going to say about this. You're going to say it's all symbolic, but just like anything magical or...
Yeah.
It's just, I'm just not buying it. I'm not, like, Jesus did not die and come back to life. People don't do that. It never happened.
Yeah.
But I like that there's some guiding rules to it. I enjoy that, but yeah, I just feel like it's I don't know. It's not selling to me. Yeah, I do admire that you guys have done deeper research. I do love that about this group, that you guys aren't taking what's just kind of given to you at the surface level, and that you guys dive in, and it does get rich for me sometimes when you guys start talking. I'm like, oh man, this is hard to keep up with. So I do admire that about you guys. But yeah, well, just anytime there's anything superstitious or magical, I don't bite it.
Well, look, I apologize for all the stupid Christians who have confirmed your biases against us. Because
I'm really close with one. It drives me bananas.
Yeah, and I've been a stupid idiot myself. So, and I'm not going to sit here and engage in trying to convert you about the resurrection, because that's not the point of this particular episode. Yeah. But I think in trying to make it relevant in some way, at least, the series that I'm writing and stuff about the historical events and such, I guess to me, the only apart from what you may consider magical, and this is the prophecy issue, which, I'm very familiar with liberal theories about prophecy and stuff, but liberal scholarship and such. But if there's anything that I would say can make some connection with what we're talking about tonight with my books and series and such, and it might be that the fulfillment of prophecy, meaning Jesus actually in Matthew 24, and by the way, this is one of those things where I'll admit a lot of Christians think Matthew 24 has not happened yet, but I've written a book, End Times Bible Prophecy, where I've gone through every verse of Matthew 24 and I've shown how it actually was fulfilled in that first century by AD 70. And this was given when Jesus, before he died. So we're talking like 40 years before. And it's amazing because he literally said, not one stone will be left on this temple, will be left upon another. And that is literally what happened. We have that in secular history. Titus destroyed the temple and not one stone was left. Those kinds of things are in Matthew 24. And what's interesting is that they fit the first century in a way that they don't fit any other century. So, for example, and again, I'm not thinking I'm going to persuade you on this, but I think it's at least relevant to the issues, is the issue of prophecy versus the magical aspect of whatever resurrection.
Oh, don't worry, I could take a burn, so it's all right. You could bring it, Brian.
But the so for example, like if you read Matthew 24, Jesus says, in fact, I can identify with a lot of the skeptics in some ways, because there's a lot of stuff that Jesus says in Matthew 24 that you go, come on, that's not a prophecy, because that can be fulfilled anytime. For example, he says there will be wars and rumors of wars. He's saying, first of all, he says, Matthew 24, he says, God's going to destroy the temple because you killed Messiah. And then he says, and when are all these things going to happen? And he goes, well, here's what's going to happen. And he goes, there will be wars and rumors of wars, famines and earthquakes in many places. And even as a Christian, I've gone, that's not really a prophecy, because that's always happening, right? So that's not fair. Yeah. But just as one example, but when I look into historical things, I start to see like, oh no, actually there's things that those statements Jesus said make sense in the first century where they don't make sense anywhere else. So for example, and this one was one of the things that blew me away, was that statement, there will be wars and rumors of wars. All right. So you look at history like, come on, there's wars and rumors of wars constantly throughout all of history. So it doesn't apply. However, you look into Roman history and you find, ironically, coincidentally, the time of Jesus was called Pax Romana. Yep. And this isn't just a Christian made up thing. It's Pax Romana, called the Peace of Rome. Yep. And so literally the known world at the time, and when the Bible uses the world, it's not talking about South America. To them, the known world was the Roman Empire. And he says that there wars and rumors of wars, that would actually make sense, because that was the only time that it was universally considered that there were no wars going on, because Rome had conquered everything and everything was at peace. And what's so funny is Tacitus even writes about that. He's a secular, godless, Roman historian, and he says he talks about how in the time of Nero, all of a sudden everything fell apart in the empire, and he says things like, there's wars here and there and all this stuff, and he starts describing how like the empire started going into chaos, and then Nero, particularly then when Nero kills himself, it almost falls apart, right? And so again, that to me, that's one example of how it's the statements of Jesus. If you look into history, I think they make a lot more sense than just this surface reading of me, a modern Westerner, reads that wars and rumors of wars. That's silly, But it does. But in the time of Pax Romana, that would be really unique. Huge. Because they're like, what do you mean wars and rumors of wars? There's nothing going on, Yeah. So that's just one example, I mean, I'm not going to try and show you where everything was fulfilled, but I guess my argument is, or my point is that prophecy fulfillment is an example, I think. It's not going to be something that's going to make someone go, oh, okay, I believe, but it certainly should make you wonder, how in the hell could someone know that in advance? Maybe there's something going on here, you know?
Yeah.
And liberal scholarship tends to say, oh, that was real. Oh, it was written after the fact. And then they pretended that it was written before the fact, so it sounded like prophecy. But there's just too much evidence that that's not the case, you know. And Daniel's a perfect example of that. You know, Daniel is a classic book where liberal theologians say, oh, all these prophecies were written after Antiochus Epiphanes, and that's why they fit perfectly. But the problem is, the prophecies in Daniel go to the 1st century, and he prophesies the coming of Messiah.
He does.
And frickin' fits perfectly. He says 70 times 7 years, 480 years, and that's exactly when Jesus came. And that was not written in the time of Jesus. So Daniel was written way before Jesus. And those are the kind of things that, at least to me, as an unbeliever, made me go, well, you know, certainly something that's weird.
Well, historically, that's quite true. I mean, people can argue that, like, oh, I don't see any Hebrew text dating back that time, but we do have the Septuagint. The Septuagint was written back in the 3rd century, so we know it was way before Jesus.
Well, not only that, but the Dead Sea Scrolls, actually.
Yeah.
The Dead Sea Scrolls were really fascinating because all the arguments about, oh, you know, the Bible was just copied over and over, and all the late copies are in the Middle Ages and stuff. And the Dead Sea Scrolls gave us copies, not the whole Bible, but it gave us a lot of copies of Old Testament books that went back 1,000 years earlier.
Yeah.
For example, Isaiah, that was the one book that they had almost a complete book. And that is truly amazing. I just can't imagine how anyone from any viewpoint could not be amazed, because the differences between Isaiah in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is like 1,000 years earlier, and the Isaiah they have in the Masoretic texts is minimal. It's almost nothing, which shows you that, you know, they really did take great care in preserving these texts. And but not only that, but it shows you that it was back in the ancient times. It wasn't written in the Middle Ages or whatever. It wasn't made up.
Fascinating.
I think to kind of tag on to George's point there about being a skeptic, this is where I think dispensationalism has done Christianity such a great disservice, because I want to be a skeptic when rapture theology has been forced down my brain since a child. And so once I get to the point where I can shed a lot of that theology, you come to a breaking point in your life, a decision. It's like, all right, do I want to decide now at the age of whenever that is to let my faith become my own, or do I just want to be a skeptic and just toss it all out because I'm done with being told that at any moment the sky is going to crack open and Jesus is coming? I'm done with all of that type of theology.
Me too. In fact, that's why I don't blame a lot of unbelievers when they point to that crap, because I was watching one of these guys again recently, just, you know, on the blood moons, John Hagen.
Oh Lord, yeah, no.
And it's like, I don't blame you guys, because these guys are such fools, and they make Christianity look bad because they really talk with this certainty and this real condescending sort of like, you know, you know what I mean? Like, we're better than you type of thing. And all this stuff is going to happen. Let me tell you, you know, he's like, the blood moons are coming. This was in 2013. The blood moons, it's on YouTube. The blood moons are coming and something big's going to happen. I'm not saying the rapture is going to be the rapture, but something big's going to happen. So they protect themselves now by saying things like, it may be, it could be, we're not supposed to set dates, but so they're lying false prophets.
Right, but buy my book in the meantime.
Yeah. Meanwhile, call us 1-800 number, make a donation today.
Yes. Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong, though. I mean, the whole money thing is like, you know, they really do. I'm convinced they really do believe this stuff. They're not just doing it to get money. They do want to make money, of course, but that's not why they're doing it. They really believe this stuff. And the problem is though, I think there is the corrupting nature because it is very popular. And one thing I've discovered as a writer is the more sensational you are, the more sales you do get. So it is certainly a temptation of corruption. And I see in the Christian community, the guys who are talking about the futuristic prophecies now, they're the ones making big. It's so funny. Look, people have like like I'm on Facebook now, spreading this stuff. And like I said, my view is a minority viewpoint, right? But so it's so funny when I see someone say something like, yeah, well, you're just writing it to make money and, your books. And I'm like, dude, if I wanted to make money, I would not be writing preterist eschatology.
Yeah.
Because it is like, trust me, I'm doing good because I'm just a great writer and good storyteller. But like, there's no money in preterism because I got to tell you, trying to advertise,
Wow.
like, on Amazon stuff as an author, you're able to advertise and stuff. Like, it's really hard to advertise because almost nobody's buying preterist stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so I have to find those guys and make them buy my stuff, right? But the problem is like, I wish there was a lot of money in it, but like, no, there's not,
Right.
and that's just, but these guys, I believe they really believe it because I know some of them, and sometimes I go on their shows, right? And and they're kind enough to have me on because I'm critiquing their viewpoint actually with mine, and they'll believe like, yeah, the mark of the beast is a computer chip, and it's coming, and they've got it. Here's the newspaper article, computer chips in the hands,
Well, Brian, that's why your fourth book has to be called Revelation: The Blood Moons.
There you go. I'm rambling on though. Sorry, but
and you're not available on CBD either, correct?
yes, I'm not available on CBD because they would never take my books. Just on Amazon. I'm a self-published author. I couldn't get any Christian publisher to do my stuff because that's another thing. I have sex and violence in my stuff because the Bible has sex and violence.
It
It's
really
rated
does.
R.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid to deal with that stuff, and I think that's part of reality. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I don't fit very well. But I will say this, though. I do believe that there are a lot of Christians. I'm one of the best sellers on biblical fiction. So the truth is there are a lot of – I think more Christians are open to the imagination and stuff than they were in the past. Because in the past, fundamentalists would be more reactive, and they would hate my stuff. And they still are out there, and they probably do. But what I'm saying is there's a lot more Christians that are more open-minded, quite frankly, more open-minded than atheists in many ways. And so they've been reading my stuff, even though it pushes the envelope with fiction and stuff. And like I said, my viewpoint's a minority view, but because I'm also engaging in a lot of spiritual warfare and stuff like that, stuff that they like, they're willing to at least read it. But the big money is in the this is still the end times and all and the transhumanism and the genetic hybridism. This is all part of the plan of the Antichrist, and the Antichrist is going to reveal himself as an alien from another planet. I mean, and it's the sensational stuff that sells. But you know what? I want to say something that, sometimes I think it's easy to forget that atheists and skeptics have just as goofy ideas. Look at Ancient Aliens. I mean, this hugely popular, History Channel thing. And I mean, talk about fairy tales. It's so goofy, and they believe anything. They believe anything proves you that aliens gave the stuff, right? And I mean, you watch this stuff, and honestly, I'm like, really? You laugh at Christians for their goofy magical ideas? Come on.
Touche.
It's hilarious, actually. But that's my point is that that's what I would argue is that technically, as G.K. Chesterton was famous for saying, when you don't believe in God, it's not that you don't believe in anything. It's that you'll believe anything, because that's basically what happens. You'll have fairy tales that are just as grand as you claim Christians are having. At least that would be my argument, George.
Yeah. I'll plug Ancient Aliens Debunked on that one too. That was a great film with Dr. Heiser. They brought him in, and just step for step. And I love the fact that they inserted all the numbers throughout the whole doc that showed you. You can go back and you look it up, and really they just used basic archaeology to debunk all of Ancient Aliens. It's great.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so many things that we take for granted now because we've heard it over and over again, like, there's no way that we could have built the pyramids. How could we have built the pyramids? It must have, and it's like, well, no, actually there's scholarly papers out there that explain how they were built. It's just like they really exist. but you just get these memes that catch hold of people. And so, and Graham Hancock writes these books. That he's a good writer. He's a good storyteller. So what can I say? But anyway,
a long time ago, I was sucked into one or two of his books. So.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good writer. He's a good storyteller. And sometimes I watch this stuff because it is entertaining.
Yeah.
Entertaining. And that's what I say is and look, as a writer, I write fiction. So I'm aware of this temptation of, if you really push it, you can get more sales. And then how far can I go where my own personal integrity might be compromised? And that's always a constant issue because I'm making stuff up, but I'm trying to be historically accurate. I'm trying to communicate what I really believe. And so I just think it's a constant temptation for most writers, because I think most writers realize that you sell better if you do certain things, and those things aren't always, truthful or whatever,
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, there's always the modern version of Graham Hancock, L.A. Marzulli.
Oh.
Yeah, L.A. Marzulli. Yeah, the elongated skulls and stuff.
Yep.
But here's something cool. Michael Heiser started a new program called Fringe Pop, and it's on YouTube, and it's like little 10-minute clips, and he'll address one of these things at a time, like the Ankara mechanism that they found in the sea, and various things. Like I don't know if he has the elongated skulls yet, but I'm sure he'll get to those eventually. But it's a very helpful tool as well. It's not quite as entertaining as Ancient Aliens, but
Brian, I'm okay with you towing the line with your, you said you used the word embellishments or creativity. I'm good with that because you are offering another point of view that I didn't even know I was missing for a long time. So, and for me, the only conflict of interest that I could see ever coming up is if you were in control of major armies and tanks and had billions of dollars at your disposal, then trying to put this stuff out, but you don't. You know what I mean? Like you said, you're in the Christian world, you're the minority point of view, but just because you're the minority doesn't mean you can't have influence. And I think you do have some influence going on.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I want to be able to change the landscape and become rich.
As we all do.
But I'm not counting on it, Awesome. Yeah, but what you say is interesting too, related to fiction and stuff, and what I tell people is, even though I'm trying to be historically accurate and all that, I say that I write theological novels, which means I think it's really pretentious. Like when someone says something like, I'm writing a novel on Noah, right? Noah's flood, and there's a lot of those out there, right? And it's like, this is historically accurate, It's like you're being dishonest, because we know so almost nothing about Noah than what's in the Bible, and then in that time period, it's so ancient, we have almost no references to it, so we don't really know. So anything you do is going to be fictional. So it's really sort of disingenuous to say something like, this is really historical. So I try to say, well, look, I do my historical research and I do mythological research, because I try to incorporate all kinds of world mythologies into my paradigm.
Yeah.
But I'm like, but no, I don't know that this is how it really was. I'm just trying to be, I'm being fictional, and I'm trying to write what I believe it may have looked like, but it's really more about the theological truth of it than it is about how did it really look? Who knows? We don't know,
Right.
We know so little about ancient history. Even the stuff that we do know, we know so little, Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Although your book, When Giants Walk the Earth, has some great scholarly research papers across it.
Yeah, and that's where I try to follow Michael Heiser's approach, where while I do take seriously some of the bizarre things in the Bible and the supernatural things, I don't want to fall into the trap of these Christians who just believe everything. And I don't mean everything in the Bible. I'm saying anything you tell them is fantastical. They'll, like giants. Oh, the Bible says there were giants. Yeah. Well, I believe actually it does say there were giants. But then it's like 25-foot tall giants. It's like, yeah, I'll believe that. It's like, no, there's no evidence of that whatsoever. And the word giant just means a tall person. And so it's more likely 7 to 8 foot tall. We have basketball players like that, right?
Right.
So I'm like, that's the kind of thing where, I think some Christians will just believe anything that's fantastical because they think, well, our God can do anything, so therefore I'll believe everything. No, you fool, Meanwhile, George is sitting there thinking, yeah, well, you believe in the resurrection, you fool.
Nah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to actually say there actually is some good research on that, which I'll bring up later. Not tonight, but there's some good research on that, which we'll go over later.
About
the resurrection. There's actually some good historical references to it, but that's at a later time.
No.
That's going to take some time.
I know. I'm just referencing basic common science that he did not resurrect.
So you deny all quantum physics?
I don't know what quantum physics are, but if they involve someone dying and then coming back, yes.
That's a future episode we're working on as well, because it's I find quantum physics fascinating. I thought it's great that you guys are covering that inside Paranormal.
Yeah, I don't mean to pitch another podcast, but
right?
You're right. I'm on another podcast called Peer-a-Normal, P-E-E-R-A normal. In other words, paranormal, but with the point is that we like to address these issues of supernatural things, but we only will address them through peer-reviewed literature. So we've talked about Bigfoot, goofy things, and most of us are pretty skeptical. I mean, we're willing to believe in supernatural, but most of the things we talk about, whether it's Bigfoot or what was the last thing, or that Piri Reis map, about that one, where it's like they had a map of Antarctica before anyone even knew, before there was even ice on it and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, no, if you look into the history of it and stuff, we look at scholarly papers on it. And we analyze it. And while we're all Christians on the show, a lot of the stuff we're pretty skeptical about, to be frank, And like, what's the other thing? Ghosts and EMP, where they take the EMP recordings, that they do on these ghost shows.
I love that.
Yeah. But we'll talk about it, but we'll refer to actual peer-reviewed scientific papers.
Yeah.
And by the way, we don't always agree with them, but we have more respect for that because Michael Heiser is the leader of the show, and his goal is like he wants to get Christians in particular to stop being so gullible and to really take more seriously if they're going to look into these issues, to be more serious about it, And I really enjoy that show because like I said, I believe in the supernatural, but I'm actually quite skeptical about pretty much most everything that's out there. I'm probably the most skeptical on the show.
Really? It's true. It's true.
Yeah. Sometimes I'm pretty naturalist. I don't know,
I love the one about the pets who have preternatural.
Yeah, which is kind of interesting because pets who kind of like know when there's something wrong, or they know when when their owners are coming back and stuff.
That was an interesting one.
So I like that about Heiser, and that's why I kind of hang out with him because of that. We want to promote the belief in a supernatural worldview, but we also want to avoid the extremes of the goofy Christians.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's hard. It's a hard balance.
Good balance.
I think it's a great journey because I think overall that can only strengthen Christianity as a whole because it makes your journey your own. You decide on something yourself as opposed to just having somebody's faith bequeathed to you. I only believe this because my parents did and their parents did.
Yeah. Or your church,
or
your church is
right.
saying this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So Brian, any of your books, any of them going to film?
No, they're too big. They're like $150 million movies. You know what I mean? Like because they're epics. They're ancient epics. I would love to see I like to try to get Enoch made into a movie because the book of Enoch is really popular these days. It's faddish. Both Christians and non-Christians are really fascinated by it. And it's really a cool story. And I wrote a novel on it called Enoch Primordial. And that would be one thing that I think would have a chance, but it's really hard because if you're writing huge epics in Hollywood, you kind of have to be an A-list writer to really be able to break through with big, huge movies. You know what I mean? So I don't expect, and the other thing is Hollywood, everyone's always asking me about this, like, because I write movies and stuff for Hollywood. They're like, oh, like you just said, right? Hey, when's your series going to become a movie or a series? And I'm like, unfortunately, the reality is Hollywood is only interested in books that are like
Twilight.
Yeah, or what's the guy with the brown glasses, the kid with the brown glasses.
Harry Potter.
Harry Potter. Yeah,
Hey.
Harry Potter, mega million sellers, that kind of
Gotcha.
thing. And no, I'm not up that good of a seller yet. And I don't think
I'm thinking
I
of
will.
movies, Christian movies like, God's Not Dead and those type of movies. They can't have that huge of a budget.
Yeah, but none of my books are like that, so
Right.
they're all huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
You don't
yeah,
want-
I do. No, listen, I've got several low budget horror films that I've tried to get made, and it's really tough. It's almost impossible to get a movie made in Hollywood. So if any movie gets made, it's literally almost a miracle, and or it is a miracle because it's amazing because there's so many factors that have to fall into place for it to work, and
Gotcha.
so it rarely does.
Just sell it to
So,
Bruce Campbell.
What?
Just sell it to Bruce Campbell.
Yeah, he's the Evil Dead guy, right?
Right?
Well, how does someone like Mel Gibson still have clout? I mean,
Well, he kind of doesn't. He's had to kind of go back to square one because of his whole, his personality problems and stuff
right.
that he caused him. But truthfully, all he has to do is just to make another good movie, and he'll be back in graces. I mean, there's still, because he's not a far leftist, he's going to be hated by Hollywood, so he'll always have to be working on his own. But there will always be some people who will work with him.
yeah.
And now he's past the anti-Semitic stuff is far enough in the past, and all these guys with the Me Too movement, they've been knocked out. Kevin Spacey. I tell you what, in a few years I'll probably be back. They're not going to be as big and famous, but they'll be able to, because the public has a short memory, and they're not really as moral as they say they are anyway. It's just all this. It's all posturing, but
Yep.
they'll be back.
Well, look at Scorsese, right?
Yeah. Or you mean Roman Polanski, here you have a guy who's a rapist, literally raping a 13-year-old back in the 70s or something. And he still is a fugitive of American law, so he never comes in the United States. You've got Hollywood people supporting this guy while they're complaining that men are rapists and sexual harassers. Oh, but Roman Polanski's a great, It's like the hypocrisy is so deep that it's just, even as a person in the industry, I just find it more and more difficult to really follow it because it's just, it's just so. I'm not talking about even the morality of it. Just the hypocrisy alone is the worst of it all. They're up there lecturing America about morality while they're the worst. While they get caught in the worst versions of it. It's like, come on.
I still don't understand how he's able to get awards.
Who's that?
Polanski.
Yeah.
He fled the country, didn't he? Have to flee?
Yeah.
Yes, and he's never been back since. But they awarded him, Oscars and all this. I do think that it's going to be harder for them to do it because they'll see their hypocrisy. Like people have been pointing it out, so they haven't been standing up for him lately. And I don't know if he'll be able to be nominated now because the Me Too is so big. But even that will sort of die down, And yeah. So I mean, think about it. So you've got who was it? So
Weinstein?
yeah, right. No. What was I thinking of? The examples of the hypocrisy are just so raving. I can't remember. So I'm thinking, Roseanne Barr. So she gets, she says this. She's an idiot. She's got mental problems and stuff, but but she's like chopped. But there are so many guys who there are literally printed examples of them saying worse things about people, and they're still around. And because she's pro-Trump, and Hollywood hates Trump. She's not even a right winger. She's not a right winger. She's a left winger, but she's just pro-Trump. So they'll do anything to destroy anybody at all. But you could say the same things that she may have said, but you still get your job in Hollywood. Because it's like they're just a bunch of hypocrites.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, fine. So you're not getting your movie through Hollywood. You answered my question.
Now, I've always been involved in more the independent side anyway, because my worldview just doesn't seem to fit. And I am working on some really cool projects that I can't tell you about. I will when I can, and I'll call you up and get on your show.
Awesome.
Because some of them are very controversial, and it's like, Hollywood will not like some of the stuff I'm working on, but America will. So we'll see if I'll be able to get something made or not. But very controversial stuff, and but I've always been independent, so I'm not in the big, I'm not involved in the studios or anything like that. And in independence, you basically have to make your own movies, raise your own money, and get your own distribution. Mm-hmm. And but today's world, there's room for that, like there never was before.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So those of us who are not part of the establishment, who don't think in lockstep with the jackboots of everyone in Hollywood. And we don't say, Heil Obama and all this kind of stuff. We have an unprecedented ability to get our work out like never before, even though we're rejected by a lot in Hollywood because of the democratization because of the internet, So it's been really cool. And, cameras, how like you used to have these impossibly expensive cameras in order to make a movie, right? 30 years ago. And now the smallest little camera can take movie quality. All that stuff has helped take away the power from the elites in Hollywood. And so now, and Netflix and Amazon, I don't know how we've got off on this topic, but anyway, Netflix and Amazon they've got an evil dark side to them, but they've also been a great counter to the studios that had all the power.
Agreed.
And now everyone's going to Netflix and Amazon because they're making movies instead of, Hollywood makes blockbusters now. They don't like making good movies anymore, just blockbusters, right? You go to Netflix, you can make your small little film that's like really good, and lots of filmmakers and actors and stuff want to do cool stuff like that.
Yeah.
And more people, they don't have to go to the big screen anymore, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's very, very new.
Yeah.
Because remember 20 years ago, if you say I'm on TV star, you're like, it's movie stars who are cool, but TV stars are nothing, right?
Like Stranger Things on Netflix, man, that's awesome. I love Stranger Things.
I mean, and it's just, Netflix has broken down that whole difference between Netflix and Amazon and Hulu have broken that whole difference between the whole, big theatrical movies versus television. Right. Now it's like, and even as someone in the industry, I don't care about going to. I like to go to theaters for something big like Jurassic Park or something, but most movies I'd rather just wait and watch it on Netflix.
Yeah,
right.
So
yeah, I agree. They have had some great stuff coming out, both on Amazon and Hulu. Actually, I loved watching. What was it? It was 20? I think it was 2211. No, 11/22/63.
Oh, yeah, the one about the time travel with assassination of Kennedy.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. So, here's something that's relevant though. Like the next novel that I plan to write after this series is based on an old screenplay I made about a serial killer, and he's a philosopher in college, and he's a philosopher killer. So, I've already written the screenplay decades ago, right? And I never got it made as a movie. And I made this little short called Crew Logic. It's on my website. And so the principle is this serial killer is killing university professors, and he's videotaping them and debating them before he kills them. And the topic of the debate is, if what you say is true about the universe, different philosophical viewpoints, give me one reason why I should let you go, and why I shouldn't kill you. Why I shouldn't kill you, and I'll let you go. And none of them can, because all of their systems have no foundation for morality. And so that's been a story that has been out there because like I said, my short has been out and stuff. And I've been wanting to write that because I wanted to make it as a movie, but it never was able to become a movie. But if I write it as a book and maybe it gets a little bit more interest, and maybe I can sell the rights to the book, make it as a movie. Who knows?
Yeah.
We'll see.
Cool.
But that would be more affordable, cheap movie like what you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Rather than my huge biblical epics that no one will want to.
Hey, the Book of Eli did well.
Yeah, that's true. But Noah did terrible.
Oh, that was
Exodus.
Russell Crowe, that one with that Noah. Yeah.
And the Exodus one did terrible. And so now they're like, well, Bible movies don't make money. Well, that's because you stupid idiots, you made movies that insulted your audience. It's like
right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah, people are a little more intelligent when it comes to their own storylines.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Their own stories. Talk about appropriation, right? The cultural appropriation. How dare you steal from our culture? And well, that's what they do all the time with Christianity, right? They steal our stories and rape them. And then they wonder why they don't make any money on them. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty
yeah.
obvious.
Noah. Yeah, of course the Watchers were giant stone creatures.
Yeah. And of course Noah was a madman who wanted to kill his children.
Right.
So anything else about the end times? Last days?
George?
What the what?
We know you got it, George. We know you got
What? No, I can't do it.
All right.
I'm not witty today.
Gumby?
What about the United States moving its embassy to Jerusalem?
Oh.
Well, guess what? I was there in Israel when they did it.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, pray tell.
We just happened to go on a vacation, and they happened to have it at that time. It was just doing a tour of Israel. Seeing all the sites,
With
Mount
Heiser?
Hermon. Yeah, with Heiser. Yes.
Oh, wow.
But we happened to be there at that time, and I was like, oh, really? It didn't turn out to be bad, of course. And I was a little worried about being in Israel, but I was embarrassed because I felt safer in Israel walking around there at night in Jerusalem than anywhere in LA. So, yeah, it was great. But they were dancing in the streets. We didn't actually go to the event celebrating it because we were there for our own tours. But while we were out in the streets, they were partying in the streets the day before, even with music, and it was really cool. I mean, it was really joyful, and it's really funny too because. Look, I don't know where any of you guys stand, and I don't need to get political, but it was kind of funny because, they've got all these flags up there. Trump makes Israel great again. And look, obviously, a lot of Israelis are gonna love Trump because obviously, right? But the truth is, they were sitting. When we met guys that were saying like, well, I don't like his environmental policies, but he's good on Israel, so they have differences of opinion, obviously, but it was still funny to see how much more support there than I would even see in America, But of course, it makes sense why because of what he's supporting, right?
Right.
But our bus driver had a Trump hat. Laughing, So I wouldn't see any of that in Los Angeles. You'd be lynched,
right?
You wouldn't see it in Cleveland either.
Is there any biblical significance, you think, to it? I know dispensationalists think so.
Yeah, no, absolutely not.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said, I don't believe so at all. But I do think it's good politically and morally and all that stuff. But no, and to be honest with you, I haven't heard what those dispensationalists are saying about that, like how they think it fits prophecy. I haven't heard. So, have you heard anything specifically? Like how it fits in with the blood moons or something? I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's just another reinforcement, I think, of the dispensational point of view, and how I guess the marriage between Judeo-Christianity and strengthening those ties, and
oh yeah, and and a lot of them sometimes see America is the eagle. When you see the word eagle in prophecy, it's America or something.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's just more of a reinforcement in their dispensational ideas. Nothing. I think even they are having a hard time creating, a connection in that theology.
Yeah.
it can't be any harder than all of their other theology. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, basically the thing was Jesus said, with this generation shall not pass away before all these things take place, and surely all these things are in the future, not the first century. Therefore, whenever Israel becomes a nation, within the generation, all this stuff is going to happen. Generations, roughly 40 years. Well, 1948, they became a nation. That's when I was reading this book called Armageddon Now, and he's talking about the history of dispensationalism. And he was writing about how all the beliefs that were going on in America during pre-World War II, and how that stuff led up to 1948 even. And it was just funny because they were talking about Israel has to become a nation, beforehand. So they thought that was part of it. But anyway, then it happened, and then 40 years went by. 1988, Jesus never came back. No rapture, and now we're on to like 70. How long is it now? 70. We're closing in on 2 generations.
Yeah.
And so now what they do is they say, well, but if you look in the Bible, there are some cases where the Bible says a generation could be 70 years. So we're still okay. And 100 years. Now they're saying, well, there's one passage in Genesis where it talks about, it's a weird, strange passage where it says, Israel will be in Egypt for 400 years, and after the 4th generation, they'll return. Well, therefore, 400 years equals 4 generations, so it must be 100 years. So they just basically keep finding some kind of like mystical, magical scripture that will say, well, a generation could be more than 40 years. And it's just, at what point are they going to finally say, well, I guess it doesn't fit. It just doesn't fit.
Right.
Now, I think they're going to always come up with some kind of change to interpret, because I claim that dispensationalism in particular, and a lot of the futurist scenarios are Christian conspiracy theories. And I say that because if you look at the history of them, they operate like conspiracy theories. Whenever you see evidence or provide evidence against a conspiracy theory, they just spin it and say, well, that just proves my conspiracy theory. In other words, nothing can ever disprove it, and they're always changing it to fit. Yeah. And that's what a lot of these end time scenarios are. Christians are they keep changing it when everything doesn't fit. Mm-hmm. And because I think people in general, the public is really dumb. We have a short memory. We forget these things. We let things go. We're like, yeah, we're not looking. Well, look at John Hagee was saying all this stuff was going to happen years ago. Hal Lindsey, Chuck Smith, all these guys, and it never happened. Why are you letting them? A false prophet's supposed to be cut off. Why are you letting them continue to have these ministries in the body of Christ? Because Christians are foolish and they just have short memories and they don't care. And I think we're all, our society has a massive problem with that, and it's disturbing to me. But having said that, I believe there is a growing turning away. Fewer and fewer people really care about that stuff. Yeah. And I think more and more Christians are becoming interested in recognizing this. Like, it's closing in on 80 years and nothing ever happened. Come on. Maybe there's something wrong with. I do believe there's an increase of people, Christians, who are starting to and you know why? Because I get a lot of these emails from fans of my work. Yeah. And I even get them where like, you know what? I was always told the typical Left Behind view, but reading your books, it makes so much more sense. I get a lot of that. And I'm actually surprised because my experience in the past has been Christians tend to be very staunchly committed to their end times view. And if you don't agree with them, you're a heretic, right? And there's still those people. But I think as time has gone on in recent years, the millennials, they don't care as much, and they're not as devoted. It's like, whatever. If it is true, whatever. So it makes them more open-minded to other views, and I think that's a good thing. It also has a downside, but I think that's a
I think that some theologians are helping too, like N.T. Wright, for example.
That's right,
and he's great. Yeah, and he openly talked about how they're like, well, the dispensational view is not so big in Europe. It's really mostly you Americans.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, and if you read any of his books, it comes out like, wow, like his New Testament in the People of God and Jesus and the Victory of God. That whole series was just phenomenal. And when I was reading, I was like going like, my gosh, he's a preterist. And I even emailed him. This was years ago. It's like he was still, he was big, but I think it was still before he got super big. And I'm like, are you a preterist? Because a lot of what you're saying is preterist, and he kind of avoided it at the time, but it was kind of funny.
That's good.
So yeah, I agree with you. N.T. Wright, and also there's more authors like Gary DeMar and Ken Gentry. Their work is getting out there more. Yeah. Yeah. And there's also an I don't want to get into the controversy of it, but
yeah. Oh, come on, don't leave us hanging.
Go for it.
There's also full preterists who are becoming their presence on the internet is very strong, and they're challenging partial preterists. But in the full preterists basically believe all prophecy is fulfilled, even Jesus' second coming, even the resurrection, even the last judgment. Mm-hmm. And while I actually have respect for them, I'm not one of them, but their presence on the internet has become a very powerful help to them, and they're engaging and challenging partial preterists. But what I like is it's a debate that's making it public, and so people are learning more about preterism. Yeah. And that is still spreading. And the full preterists are getting out and debating dispensationalists, and they're doing a great job of ripping them apart. So I think that the combined forces of full and partial preterism, but that could be a very controversial thing within that camp, right? Because the implications are pretty big, and I acknowledge that. But I'm grateful, because I think the full preterists have a lot of good things to say, and I don't agree with them, but some of the things I think that sometimes they're addressing things better than partial preterists do. So so it's quite an interesting time we live, I think I was just saying now is the time for new views to be considered, like never before. And I'm hoping that my books will be on the top of those. That idea is being considered.
That's right.
Buy my books.
I've loved them all. I've endorsed them over and over again across all of our web pages. So I think they're very well written. I think they're very well researched. If not just those books, but also all the companion books, which I think I've pulled almost every one of your companion books. And I've loved them all. So
yeah, one of the things I did was, because I knew it was going to be controversial, I footnoted these apocalypse novels, because I know Christians are going to be reading this and they're going to go, "What? Where did he get that?" Because some of it's wild and some of it you've never heard before, but it's there in history. So I footnoted him so you can go back and read. And I got, I don't just cite books. I actually give chunks of scholarly arguments in the back. So sometimes half the text of the novel is actually scholarly quotations for those who want to learn more. But also, like the books you're mentioning, I have, of course, End Times Bible Prophecy, which kind of goes through Matthew 24. But then I have what's called Matthew 24 Fulfilled, or something like that. I can't remember. I should know the title, right? But yeah, Matthew 24 Fulfilled. And all it is it's more like my notes of how, and I go through Matthew 24, but also some other things in the Bible. And I pull quotes from the Bible and pull quotes from history to just show how prophecies have been fulfilled that many Christians think have yet to be fulfilled in the future. So it's sort of like a raw source material for those who really want to just get into the raw material and see for themselves, rather than just, trust me, So I'm like, look, here's where Tacitus says this, or here's where, whatever, some Latin historian or whatever says this, right? Yeah. And so that's been a surprise. I wouldn't think people would want the notes like that, because I say, these are my notes, but people have really been enjoying that one, and it's been a good resource for them, as well as my other book, which is Israel in Bible Prophecy. And I think that that's really relevant to what we've been talking about tonight, because I go through how Israel has been fulfilled in the New Testament, and I use heavy scripture arguments to show that the new covenant kingdom in Christ is the Israel of God. And it's not like a replacement theology. It's just Jesus Christ, and N.T. Wright talks about this. Jesus Christ transforms the covenant and transforms it into the new covenant, which is now around Jesus the Messiah, and Jesus is the land of Israel. Jesus the Messiah is the temple. Jesus the Messiah is, it's like Messiah reorganizes the covenant around himself. And I try to make that argument as well from other scriptures and show how in particular, everyone knows the promise to Abraham, right? And dispensationalists make this a lot, right? God gives fivefold promise, I think, or something like that to Abraham, like this land will be yours, your descendants will be as the stars in the sky, right? And he gives all these things. And I go through how each of those promises are fulfilled in Christ, not in the way most people think is they're supposed to be fulfilled in a geopolitical ethnic people called Jews. They're actually, the New Testament says all that is fulfilled in Christ, which is to me a glorious, beautiful expression of how, wow, if we're in the new covenant, we have all these glorious covenantal things that God talks about in the Old Testament. They're now applied to us because we are in Christ. And it's just it's one of my favorite books that I wrote, and probably one of the more controversial ones because of the fact that it's basically arguing against dispensationalism.
Yeah.
Even rabbinic Judaism.
Yeah.
Because I know in the Old Testament the promise to Abraham, didn't it extend from like the river Euphrates all the way down to the Nile?
The Nile,
cutting through swaths of like Syria, Egypt, and a large part of Saudi Arabia. So I know that there's a strain within rabbinic Judaism that believes that the borders that exist today are not their final borders.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's why, looking at the map today geopolitically and all the wars that are existing all around Israel.
By the way, that's another reason why, and one of the things I like to point out, again, futurists will spin everything to support their view, but I find it particularly powerful that we all can agree, no matter what you believe, we all can agree that the temple certainly was the incarnation of the old covenant, certainly, right?
Yeah.
Now you may have beliefs about prophecy in the future about it, but nonetheless, it is the heart and soul of the old covenant in the Torah, right?
Yes.
In the Old Testament. So I find it interesting that my argument of saying, God's destroying the temple is his symbol of eliminating the old covenant and bringing in the new covenant that does replace it. And it transforms it into something different, right? And isn't it interesting that God historically destroys the temple in such a way that it can never be rebuilt historically without starting World War III? I mean, it's just now, of course, dispensationalists will say yes, and that's why they're going to do it. And World War III will come, and Jesus will stop them all. But the point is it's not going to be rebuilt, folks. You can go ahead and believe in magical future prophecy, but the problem is that isn't it interesting that what has actually happened fits my view far better because it sort of validates God is not going to let that be built again because the new covenant has arrived and the old covenant is dead forever, and that fits my theology better than speculating, saying, well, but he's going to find a way to rebuild in the future,
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, so I've always considered that to be a strong argument for it. Don't you find it interesting that God destroyed it in such a way that it's never going to be rebuilt again because they can't without starting World War III, and they wouldn't be able to even throw the first hammer before World War III would start. So you couldn't get it to fit your Great Tribulation and all that, and the Antichrist, you couldn't get it to fit because he couldn't even begin to rebuild the temple without the war. You see what I'm saying? And the dispensationalist scenario requires the temple's rebuilt.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
But it can't be because World War III will start, so you can't.
And we don't have the Levitical priest records anymore, do we?
Yes, they were destroyed. Guess when they were destroyed? In the
70
destruction of
AD.
Israel.
Right.
Literally, they went in and they burned all the records, and so there's no way that anybody can actually connect them. And again, isn't that interesting? Historically, God operates such that he does not allow them to be able to trace their ancestry back to Levitical priesthood, so you can't find an actual Levitical priest. Yeah.
No priest,
Wow.
no temple.
Yeah.
No deal.
Awesome. Once again, look into Brian's books, all of them, the Chronicles of Nephilim, Chronicles of the Apocalypse, all the companion books. He even has cool free stuff across his website, peer-reviewed research papers, lectures on DVD, ton of cool stuff you can grab off of it. Anything you want to leave off on, Brian?
No, that's it. Oh, and just that I'm not sure if my mind drifted, but all my stuff is exclusively on Amazon, but it's in paperback, ebook, and audiobook format. So it's all there, and it's super, super good prices. So, and I try to keep the price as low as possible, so I'll sell as many as I can.
Yeah,
Make it as easy as possible to purchase.
With expert narration by the author himself, I might add. George.
Thank you.
Good night.
Hey, there's nothing taboo over brew.
Good night.
Good night.
All right. Everybody, have a great night.